My friends, what's going on? Andrew Hackett here from the Trace podcast. Podcast, excuse me. Today, I will be doing this one solo. I often do these with my friend Isabel, and there'll be other guests sometimes as well. But I got to keep the movies coming. Talking about movies is such a comforting, therapeutic thing. And today we're doing a movie that I believe is extremely comforting and therapeutic and hilarious. It's called Joe versus the Volcano from 1990. Um, First of all, do the subscribe thing. There's comments and stuff if you want to get involved. Also, I have a history of podcasting. And if you check out the Trace podcast, thetracepodcast.com, you can see all kinds of interviews I've done or lots and lots of discussion about movies, including with filmmakers. But right now it's time to just be with my friends right here in this space and talk about the movies. We always need the movies. I saw the quote recently, I can't remember who it's by, that said that like any sorrow can be born if it's made into a story. Any suffering can be lived with if you give it some kind of meaning. The movies, whew, they sure have helped me find meaning in the world and in life. And this is one of those movies. And it might just seem like if you've seen Joe versus the Volcano, which if you're watching this, I would assume that you have, but maybe you haven't. This is a movie that has helped me make some kind of sense out of life. And that's the part of this movie that is really existentialist. This is an existential rom-com. It's one of the few. I'm sure I could think of some others if I did some work. But well, there's a new one, Hitman, relatively new. The Richard Linklater movie is kind of an existential rom-com noir something. It's actually quite good. But anyways, let's just get right into Joe versus the Volcano, which came out in 1990. I saw this, if I remember correctly, with my dad, and I don't know if it was 90 or 91 when I saw it, but we were living in Mexico at the time, and we went to see it. And from what I remember, first of all, I had a great time. I loved this movie from the first time I saw it. I already like everybody else, I already liked Tom Hanks, and I don't know, I wouldn't have seen When Harry Met Sally. Well, you know what? I did know Meg Ryan already because of Inner Space, which I loved as a kid and love now. But so everything about the movie, it was fun, it was sweet, it was kind of weird, and it was romantic in a way that was nice. Everything about it was wonderful. It gets totally bizarre at the end, and there will be spoilers. There's always going to be spoilers on these, so just warning there. But so yeah, saw it, probably was 11 or 12 years old at the time, and I had a great time. And then we left the theater. My dad did not like it at all. And his reaction, it turns out, is the reaction that a lot of people had to this film. This movie wasn't really very successful. It had its, people that liked it, but it didn't do very well. It was considered like a disappointment to whatever for Hollywood. But I was always a huge fan of Joe vs. Volcano. Always showed it to people, showed it to friends, and most people that I know that have seen it like the movie. I think it has become kind of like like a cult classic, I guess. But it's just a beautiful, special film. Now, the story here goes that the writer and director of this movie, John Patrick Shanley, he I believe was a playwright first, but he wrote the script that was Moonstruck, which was directed by Norman Jewison. And of course, Moonstruck was a huge, huge success in every way. By the way, it's amazing, but Nicolas Cage in 1987 was in both Raising Arizona and Moonstruck. Wow. I mean, how much better can you get that, like pop movies that are totally artistic and profound and beautiful? Moonstruck and Raising Arizona is about as good as you can do, both those. So anyway, so John Patrick Shanley must have gotten a green light to, do whatever he wanted probably. And so this was what he did. He wrote and directed Joe versus the Volcano. He had also, and after this, he wrote the script for Alive, which I didn't know, that Ethan Hawke airplane survival cannibalism movie that I saw in the theater, also in Mexico. And he ended up later on, he wrote, I believe it was a play called Doubt, and it got turned into a movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep. I've actually never seen it. It's I think Meryl Streep, right? It's supposed to be very good, but I haven't seen it. It looks scary to me. Not scary like horror movie scary, like drama scary. Steven Spielberg was a producer on this movie as well. If I had to do a double feature with Joe versus the Volcano, I was thinking about this. I think it would be It's a Wonderful Life. It's that type of movie. It's a movie that is very sweet, and it's funny, and it's beautiful, and it's sensitive, but also like it's got some ideas, and which gives it like an extra like a power, I think, to it. And basically, the idea in Joe versus the Volcano is that Tom Hanks works at a utterly miserable factory, and he works deep in the heart of it. The beginning of the movie is like him like descending into hell via a German expressionist style. By the way, Joe versus the Volcano is a movie about movies. It cites so many other films, and you could do a whole episode just on all the other films and genres that are being referenced. Especially notably the African Queen, but a bunch of other ones too. But there's this very German expressionist kind of beginning, but instead of like as horror, more like as comedy. And he's miserable in his job. We find out that he used to be a firefighter. He had some kind of traumatic experience, so he's got like PTSD, I guess, and it's just basically been in a depression for years. And he finds out that he has a terminal illness, brain cloud, and he quits his job. One of the great scenes in the movie when he quits this job, it is the fantasy of all fantasies of how you could quit that job that you hated. It's wonderful. Talk about wish fulfillment. Man, every time I watch that scene, it's so fantastic. And anyways, the secretary that works with him is Meg Ryan. She plays 3 parts in this movie, and all of them are hilarious and wonderful. All of them. This is my favorite Meg Ryan performance, movie, whatever. Favorite Tom Hanks by far. I mean, there's nothing else even close to this for me in his career. He's been in a lot of good movies, but nothing like Joe versus Volcano. And basically somebody shows up, a rich guy shows up at his house, says that he knows that he's got this terminal illness, and he says, "Hey, why don't you go out in style? You know you're going to die in a few months anyways. I'll go spend a bunch of money, go have fun, take a trip across the ocean, go to this island, and jump into a volcano to appease these tribal people that he needs. This rich guy needs them for like some mineral that's on their whatever island. It's ridiculous. Okay, it's called Joe versus Volcano. What do you think? It's kind of a magical realism movie, but with an existential, philosophical, search for meaning that's like in no way fantastical. This is a reminder that movies can use any kind of style and still get to truth. Truth and like reality aren't exactly the same thing, or meaning, you could say. Meaning isn't the same thing as facts. Reality isn't the same thing as realism. If somebody tells me a movie's really realistic, my first thought is, then why would I watch it? Like for me, a realistic director is David Lynch, where they're realistic because they feel like life, even if things happen that are crazy. I think Kubrick's films have a realism of an authenticity. Even The Shining, to me, has a realism, the fear of the father. The feeling's real, even if everything that's happening is fantastical and wild. Joe versus Volcano fits right into that. So anyways, he accepts this proposition to go jump into a volcano. And so he goes on a shopping trip, which is wonderful. He flies to LA, where he's picked up by the rich guy's daughter, Meg Ryan, playing her second character, who is a flibbertigibbet, as she says, which is a reference to His Girl Friday on the shelf. So yeah, he has a little adventure with her. Then he gets on a boat with the third Meg Ryan, and this is the most like naturalistic, least cartoonish. I mean that in a good way, of the Meg Ryan characters. And then she doesn't know why they're going to this island. She's going to get the boat for taking them there. That's why she's doing it. They start to fall in love. He has to tell her that he's going to jump, that he's got a brain cloud and he's going to jump into a volcano. And she's like, what? And she's clearly trying to get away from him. And everyone in this movie wants to get away from death and sickness. And he's just like confronting it because he has to. There's a big, huge storm. The boat sinks. He helps her survive via his luggage. That's a whole joke in the movie. They end up getting to the island. They're going to jump in. Right before they jump in, she says, let's get married. And it's really lovely. And then they decide to jump in the volcano together, and we'll see what happens. And it's love. It's ridiculous, but it's also beautiful. They jump in. Right at that moment, the volcano explodes. They get thrown out into the ocean, and the whole island goes underneath. And then they're stuck in the ocean. And he says, well, I don't know. It doesn't look good. We're in the ocean. There's nothing around. And then she goes, it's always going to be something with you, isn't it, Joe? And then their luggage submerges from the ocean, and there they go. The idea being, they lived happily ever after. So that's kind of like what goes on in Joe versus Volcano. It's a totally wild, hilarious script. A few movies to put it into perspective. In 1990, we've got Goodfellas, Edward Scissorhands, which I also saw in the theater in Mexico at this time. Wild at Heart, the David Lynch movie, another Nicolas Cage. Miller's Crossing, so the Coen brothers, boom. Richard Linklater's debut, Slacker. Abel Ferrara's King of New York. The Iranian film Close Up. Legendary Total Recall. Even Home Alone. Pretty Woman. Ghost. We're in the Demi Moore comeback right now. Ghost is still kind of fun, Tremors. Dances with Wolves, which won like all the Oscars. Not Goodfellas, to this day considered one of the more outrageous mistakes that the Oscars have made. We'll see how it goes this year. I've logged over 100 movies from 1990 on Letterboxd, so that's absurd. That's either impressive or it means that I need help. I'm not sure which one. So yeah, this one really didn't do very well with critics or audiences, but people, clearly other studios, whatever, people noticed, hey, look at that. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan are pretty good together. So there you go. We get Sleepless in Seattle. You've Got Mail, which are which are nice movies. They're fun, but I mean, they're not Joe versus Volcano. Come on now, somebody. This movie, first of all, it's class conscious in a way that's really cool, especially nowadays when like billionaires just aren't content to just have all the money, but now they have to have the government and try and ruin all our lives as well. Man, these billionaires, can't they just go be billionaires and leave us alone? Ugh. Anyways, this movie clearly shows that there's a lot of people, obviously around the world, but in America too, that the economy is not really working very good for them. They have a miserable job. They're unhappy, and a rich person can just come and like buy them off, basically. I like that the movie is aware of this. You have an awareness of PTSD. It's clear. The movie is very clear that Tom Hanks had a traumatic event as a firefighter, and he wasn't able to immediately recover. And by the way, there's so much, there's oftentimes, if you're say in the military, or I suppose a firefighter or certain time, that if you go through something, if you watch enough action films and police films, I just went through and watched all the Dirty Harry movies. Like Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry Callahan, I enjoy those films, but they're ridiculous. They're fantasies. He never has PTSD from all these things, all the people he's killed and all the things he's been through. Okay, that's a fantasy. The reality is when people experience violence or do violence, it creates trauma. And you're going to have to, anyone with that kind of PTSD in relation to violence, again, even if you're the one that's doing the violence, is, from what I understand, that psychologists have learned that violence traumatizes literally everyone around. And so this guy obviously should have been getting therapy and should have been being helped, but instead he's just on his own in the workforce. Pull up your bootstraps, get out of bed and go to work. So I like the awareness of economy and class, but then also an awareness of things like PTSD that, most people I mean, all of us go through traumatic things. So, I mean, it's normal, to experience PTSD at different points in your life. It's just a part of the world. It's a dangerous world. We also have something in this movie, which is this to me is a spiritual film. I would primarily call it existential, which doesn't need, which, there's religious and atheistic forms of existentialism, famously, like from via Kierkegaard, you get the original, but unless you're counting Pascal, but still Pascal, Kierkegaard, and even people would consider Dostoevsky as a novelist, a existentialist. They're all Christian. They're all religious, different types of Christian, but they're all Christian. And then you get Nietzsche, and then you get Heidegger, and then you get Sartre, and most of them are more atheistic. I don't really know about Heidegger. I don't really care, but certainly Sartre and Nietzsche are, passionately atheistic. So existentialism, depending on where you're coming from, could have a spiritual dimension or not. It's up to you. This film, though, whatever I call it a spiritual awakening, but you could call it whatever you want. The point is, it's like when something happens in your life, and all of a sudden, it's like, yes, you wake up from, yes, basically waking sleep. And how many of us kind of, you find yourself just doing the same thing over and over, and all of a sudden one day you're like, whoa, what's going on? Where am I? Who am I? What am I doing? This happens to him because of an event, capital E event. He finds out, it's not true, but he's told that he has a terminal illness and that he's going to die. This is, yes, what philosophers call event, capital E event. Event is when something happens that's totally unpredictable and out of nowhere, that you can't control, that just creates a situation where you have to change, and that's not an option. You have to change because of what's happened. Like if you get into if you have a really serious physical injury, if you lose a loved one, if you go through a really difficult breakup, on and on and on. There's all kinds of things that can happen. It doesn't always have to be bad. It could be that you totally fall in love with somebody. It could mean that you just all of a sudden made, your best friend out of nowhere, and you didn't even see it coming, or you didn't plan it, nothing. It could be a spiritual event, which so many people have, which are difficult to put into words usually. But in this, Versus the Volcano is certainly a movie about event and what to do in the wake of event. And that's what this movie is about. Because this movie really gets started once he is told falsely that he has this terminal illness. That creates a series of choices and reactions and that lead to everything else that happens in the story. So it's a reminder that we've all had things happen where your life is just now, today, I'm a new person in some kind of way because of what just happened. And the question about identity isn't so much the event that happened, but how you understand the event, how you give the language to event, how you create meaning around event. And then we say, oh, I'm this way because such and such happened. And we use these things. These are the things that give our lives meaning. It's the stories that we tell about who we are. And a lot of that is related to this concept of event, which again is outside of your control. What a person has control or an agency in is how you interpret and create the story of what has happened to you. But you can't take away the reality of what happened. You can only give it meaning. The scene after he finds out that he has a terminal illness and he goes to the back to work, you just have to see it. I mean, even if you've seen the movie, it's on YouTube. The scene where Tom Hanks quits, it's just glorious. He kind of gives a little bit of a meek kind of tells him he's going to quit, and he's about to leave the office, and then his boss, played hilariously by Dan Hedaya, who's always fun, everything he shows up in. His boss is like, if you're going, leave, you'll be easy to replace or something. And then we get this kind of close up of Tom Hanks as he's about to walk out of the office, and he says to himself, I should say something. And he gets his moment. He gets his moment where he gets to shine. And then he tells the boss off, and it's a wonderful, wonderful scene. And he asks Meg Ryan, the secretary, who's watching all this in amazement, he asks her out on a date. It's beautiful. They have a date and it's really nice, but then of course he tells her that he has this disease and she freaks out. And he's sad and lonely. And then a little bit later, once the plot really gets going, and he's going to start this trip across the country that's going to end up across the ocean, going to jump into a volcano. Before he leaves New York, he has the rich guy gives him all these credit cards, and he gets to hire a limo and go shopping. This scene is just in the movie, I think, for pure enjoyment. It's really funny and goofy and light, but the limo driver is Ozzie Davis, who is in Do the Right Thing, and is a wonderful, filmmaker, actor, just like an amazing person, period. Ozzie Davis plays the limo driver, and he's beautiful, and they become friends, and it's so nice. And it's a wonderful addition to the film. And they avoid, by the way, doing making him like the magical, thing. He gets to just be a person who's a limo driver who's hanging out with Tom Hanks, and it's really nice. It's cool. When he goes to LA, it's in the tradition of movies like Annie Hall, how Woody Allen doesn't like going to LA. He just wants to stay in New York. This movie has it's not anti-LA, but it's kind of making fun of LA. And he goes, they're like driving, it looks like Malibu or something. And she says, "What do you think?" And he goes, "It looks fake. I like it." It's the kind of thing I guess a New York person would say about LA, probably. And yeah, she introduces herself and she says, "I'm a flibbertigibbet." One of these references to old school 30s, 40s, 50s filmmaking, Hollywood filmmaking, super fun. And then, so we pretty quick learned that this Meg Ryan, the second of her characters, is, troubled. She's a rich girl who's, she's a trust fund girl who doesn't seem to have her own real identity. And she's stuck in this, like, having to do what her dad says for money, but like not being happy about it. And she takes him up to this lookout. And there's this beautiful, it's one of the key existential moments in the movie where they're just, kind of quiet, sitting in the car. And then she says, "Would you like to hear one of my poems?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then she goes, "Long ago, the delicate tangles of his hair covered the emptiness of my hand. Would you like to hear it again?" She talks all like, maybe she's kind of doing like, I don't know, like, it's not Katharine Hepburn, but it's like that old style of Hollywood women and like from the 30s and 40s talking. It's a lot of fun. And then she, all of a sudden she bursts out, "Do you ever think about killing yourself?" And he's like, "What?" And he says all kind. It's a really nice scene of like just being with someone, like you just met this person and they're telling you like they're like revealing their like suicidal ideation to you, and you're like, "What in the world? What do I do here?" But it's handled very sweetly. They don't make fun of that, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. This section with him and Meg Ryan looking out on LA from, I don't know, the Hollywood Hills or something. It rules, and Meg Ryan in this movie is out of control. The other Meg Ryan movie that I would add to this, in terms of just like getting to see her do some things you haven't seen her do, is In the Cut, the Jane Campion film, which is a gnarly, kind of a nasty movie, but it's really good. It's also got Mark Ruffalo, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Kevin Bacon. It's loaded. It's a really cool movie. And you've never seen Meg Ryan like this. And in fact, from what I understand, I think it kind of ruined her career in a lot of ways. People were really mad. They didn't want to see her be gritty and whatever. Anyways, Meg Ryan, she probably deserves more, even more props than she currently has. Okay, so here the movie gets into this whole thing about on the boat, and he's now with the third Meg Ryan, who's like, whatever, the most like normal, I guess, and like the Meg Ryan that you're like waiting and expecting to see. And once again, I mean, you can see when you watch this movie, it's no surprise that some people were like, "Hey, we should get them in a movie again together." And Sleepless in Seattle, which came out, I think, like 3 years after this, I think 93. It totally makes sense. And Sleepless in Seattle, hey, it's a very nice movie. It's good, but it's not as daring as this is. This movie is like, you haven't seen this movie before, and you've seen Sleepless in Seattle or movies like it, even if it's very good at what it does. Another movie that references a lot of old movies, obviously, especially Fair to Remember, but I love, and The Dirty Dozen, that whole thing. That's really fun in Sleepless in Seattle. But so he starts connecting with the third Meg Ryan, and they're clearly like falling in love. And then he tells her that he's got a brain cloud and he's going to die and he's going to jump into the volcano, and she freaks out, basically. And if another event didn't happen, then what would happen is they'd get to the island, she'd drop him off, and she'd leave, because she now is like, no, I don't want to start a romance with someone that's like about to die, you know? And so that's the way it would go, except now we get a different kind of event. There's a storm, a big storm. And the boat goes under. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, who's unconscious, but he gets all of this waterproof luggage that he had bought earlier. This is their version of Chekhov's gun, by the way, the luggage. Nice. And there's this whole like section of the movie that's another one of the best parts, where he's just trying to give her water, and but he's like playing with all this stuff that he has in his luggage, like playing golf and listening to music on the radio, and they're just like floating in the ocean. And meanwhile, she's unconscious, and you don't know what's going on with her. And there's a key scene, which is the image that I used for this, the thumbnail image or whatever, which is this image of him. He wakes up in the middle of the night at one point, and now he's all sunburned. He clearly is like not really drinking the water. He's giving it to her. He's not in a good spot at all. And the moon is like absurdly big here. And you see it from far away, and at one point it looks like he's holding up the moon. It's really pretty and outrageous. You know, the moon would never look that big anywhere on this planet, as far as I know. But it doesn't matter. What in this movie, that's how he's experiencing it, right? And anyways, he would be kind of like delusional at this point, based on not drinking enough water and being stuck out at sea and stuff. But he has this little, not a speech, but he says, he's looking at the moon, and he goes, "Dear God, whose name I do not know, thank you for my life. I forgot how big. Thank you. Thank you for my life." I love this. I think the concept of gratitude and being just like grateful to have lived at all on this planet. You can say, he says, "Dear God, whose name I do not know," right? So right away, he's opening up the thing to you of any religion. But I would say also, again, if you're not religious, that doesn't mean that, people that aren't religious don't practice gratefulness. Gratefulness is just a sense of like, I'm so glad to experience the good things in this world: friendship, love, food, drink, movies, art. And so regardless of how one feels about religion and the concept of God or gods or whatever, the concept of gratefulness is for everyone. No one is exempt from being able to express gratefulness. The idea that you have to express that gratefulness to a specific entity, like, of course, no, you can just thank whatever you want to call it. The point is, it captures this feeling of, I'm so glad, even if I didn't have the most amazing life ever, man, I've had so many beautiful experiences. I mean, I felt that way when I saw this when I was 11 or 12, and I feel that way now when I'm 46. So there you go. I saw this movie like 35 years ago. By the way, the year after Do the Right Thing. Yeah, Do the Right Thing was 1989. Totally different kind of movie, but both masterpieces to me. So this sense of gratefulness and awe and wonder, I mean, I feel those things every day. And it's one of the reasons why I watch films too, is to experience that. And like I just watched, maybe I'll do a video on it someday, but the movie Desert Hearts, which is like a lesbian romance movie that was made in the mid 80s. And it was so beautiful and so good. And so it just made me, it's sustenance, especially when, in scary times. Like, I'm recording this on February 7th, 2025, and the United States that I live in is really scary and bad, and movies and art, and it's easy to forget about all the good things, in the world. And it's difficult though, because on the same time, you want to be alert and ready to stand with, have solidarity with any peoples that are persecuted by this government, starting with, of course, immigrants and queer and trans people, and then now anyone who isn't a white male, I guess. Um, I should be taking more advantage of that. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I know I have white male privilege and everything. I'm aware. I know, but I'm totally in every way against MAGA Musk. I have solidarity with the people of this that I share this world with, all my friends and family who are from all different backgrounds and ethnicities and genders and sexualities. And by the way, I don't even really actually identify as like whatever. I'm very uncomfortable with being male. Uh, all right, that's what happens on YouTube Live. Okay, things like that. So take that for what it's worth. Point is, we get a reminder here in this film of how these moments when we experience profound gratefulness, and what a beautiful thing it is to have those moments. And you start to realize here, they get to the island. She wakes up, she regains consciousness, and they end up still getting to the island they were trying to go to, and they're received. This part of the movie, I understand why some people wouldn't like it because it gets so outrageous, but also I could imagine some people having a certain feeling about the way that this the people that live on this island, but they're like a mixture. What is it? They're like a mixture of like Druids, Jews, and Romans or something that got shipwrecked there like 2,000 years ago or something. So they're not they're like a European culture that has been living on this island for 1,000 or 2,000 years. It's outrageous. Okay. But there is a fun scene where they're getting all pampered before they're going to go up to the volcano. And then you realize this is like a screwball comedy, even though as it's also a rom-com and an existentialist kind of film. But if you can't ride with some outrageous kind of goofiness, yeah, this movie might not work for you. You have to suspend your disbelief and go into another world here. And there's another one of the really special moments in this movie is when they get to the top of the volcano and he's going to jump in. She says, "I love you." And he says, "I love you too." But the timing stinks. And then she says, wait, let's have the chief marry us. Let's get married. And so they get married right before he's going to jump into the volcano, which I find to be totally romantic. The idea of getting married, knowing that you're only going to be married for like 5 minutes, but like, this is like the leap of faith, that people talk about with Kierkegaard and existentialism. And by the way, this movie understands that the leap of faith isn't just absurd belief or irrational trust or belief in a deity, but really the leap of faith is about, making a commitment to another person. But then in the absurdity of the film, she decides, well, I'm going to jump in with you. And he's like, no. And she goes, where thou goest, I goest, whatever, the Shakespeare thing. And so then they get to the moment of knowing that they're about to most likely die when they jump. And they're just both kind of in this moment of clarity of like, they love each other. They're just so glad that they found each other, even if it was for that short amount of time, that is still worth it. And they're going to take the leap. The leap being, I think, the symbol here of the impossibility, not literally, but seemingly impossibility of sustaining romance, romantic love, commitment. And they jump and they get thrown out of the volcano into the ocean. We get one more joke about him being kind of negative. And the luggage reappears again. And it literally says like they lived happily ever after. So theoretically they'd get rescued and go start a life together. This is also the kind of movie that does this thing that I really appreciate, which is like when the end of your movie is really the beginning of it's like the end is actually the beginning, because now it's just starting, like their life together. What's that going to be like? Well, that's what, when you watch a movie and you live with it, you get to imagine and you get to talk about it with your friends. Like, what happened to them when they got back? What did they do? Where did they go? Hmm. Um, it's reminded me too of like the Viktor Frankl book, Man's Search for Meaning, and which is existential psychology, where even when bad oh, so at some point here, he realizes he probably doesn't have a brain cloud, that was like actually a scam to get him to do this. And so, um, but still, he's in Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl is talking about how um, we all need meaning um, to live, and if you lose a sense of meaning and purpose that for you, that in a way you just kind of like die. And he talks about hope, meaning, and this is all in the context of in real life. He was in a concentration camp, and he survived, and then he wrote this book after and became a famous psychologist. But I remember when I read Man's Search for Meaning, it was so the Christian language of this would be it was convicting in the sense that it made me feel like, oh, how can I not have hope if someone like could keep hope alive even in a concentration camp? Like, what excuse do I have if I'm feeling despairing or hopeless? Like, I have all the reason to be hopeful. And and I guess that applies to where we're at now. Again, speaking of February 2025 in the United States, like you got to have hope to have the energy to resist, you know? And so Joe versus Volcano ends up being a movie that's not like really overtly political or anything, but in a way has immense political consequences because it's about people finding meaning, finding hope. And then, because what are you going to do when you have meaning and hope? You're going to go live in the world. You're going to go impact your society, your neighbors, your community. And it's why having hope and having meaning in your life is actually beneficial to everyone, as long as the meaning that you have in your life is loving and it's not exclusionary, you know? Because if you like love everybody, but you hate this group, whatever, racial, sexual, religious, then your meaning is trash, I would say, ethically, you know? So you got to find meaning and purpose, but have that connected to love, love of all, pluralistic, not love of just the people that you like, that you prefer. That's kind of these are some of the things that I take out of this movie. And again, a reminder that when we tell our stories, um, we are creating meaning, and hopefully, that meaning that we're creating, like after all these experiences, is this character Joe more or less prepared to re-enter the world in a more positive way? Like he absolutely is. The fact that he has found meaning and purpose, that's not just individual. It ends up having societal, political consequences. More reason for all of us to not give in to despair, but keep hope alive. And hope is always connected to action. So that doesn't mean passive hope. That means active hope. So those are some of the things that Joe versus the Volcano makes me think about. It's a movie that has moved me again for at this point 35 years. I've probably seen it, I don't know, 25, 30 times. I've shown it to so many people. All like I've shown this to so many people over the years, and I'll show it to so many more. And so far, look at this. We've got 3 films now that we've done here. We've got Before Sunrise, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and now Joe versus Volcano. Those are 3 pretty different movies. Before Sunrise and Joe versus Volcano being quite romantic, Fire Walk with Me, not. Not romantic, but powerful. But 3 movies that all are full of truth as well as, you know, wonderful filmmaking. 3 completely different films in terms of style also. So, my friends, thank you for being on another one of these movie journeys with me. We're going to keep it coming. Isabel and I are going to be back soon with an episode together. And I'm also going to be doing a few other, not just movie stuff. I'm going to do some other kinds of storytelling and communicating on here. Sometimes, also I probably will talk a little more specifically about whatever's happening, like politically, but all in a form of hope, love, meaning, truth. So, all right, my friends, talk soon. Keep it up.